The sun was setting as James puffed down the main line with a line of trucks in tow. The trucks were filled with scrap, all bound for the ironworks at Kildane. A recent cleanup at Knapford docks had turned up a lot of rusted track and machinery that hadn't been used for a long time. And James had been rusted to take it, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. He had been hoping to be asked to take a late-night passenger service or, at the very least, have a rest.
I'm surprised you're grumbling, James. Besides, we're full of metal in your favorite color.
A truck called.
Shut up! Rusty red is no color for a splendid engine such as myself. Sparkling crimson red is better.
James snapped back.
Oh, you mean like your nose that one time with the bees?
Another truck laughed. James wheeshed and snorted onwards, eager to put this job behind him once and for all.
James arrived at the scrapyard just as the sun disappeared over the horizon. The air grew colder as he puffed closer into the smelting shed.
Brr. I really don't like this.
Neither do I, old boy. But a job is a job,
said his driver. As James came to a stop near the main office, the foreman walked up.
Thank you for bringing us in. Now, I hate to ask, but could you shut your trucks into the siding over there?
What, me? Why me? I'm not a shunter.
James hissed.
Well, Ari and Bert are still being repaired. Some bad fuel this morning wrecked their engines. Thankfully, Thomas brought some later. After the repairs, they'll have the fuel to work with at least,
he said before heading back to his office. James grumbled dreadfully as he shunted the train into the sidings. The trucks tittered cheekily as he did so.
Hey, look, guys, it's a new shunter. Can't be. This shunter is a big fat tender, and you know what they say? Tender engines don't shunt.
Be quiet.
James snorted as he bumped the trucks into the buffers.
Trucks giving you a hard time?
Said a voice. James looked over and saw a young man with a backpack standing near the line side. He had a camera in one hand, and his attention was focused on the small screen. James looked down at the lad incredulously. He was used to train spotters, but at this time of the evening, and in a scrapyard, he found it a bit odd, and he really wished he was pulling something more splendid than dirty trucks and dirty sidings.
Yes? Now, pray tell, what are you doing here? This is private railway property, you know.
Oh, I know.
He sat his camera down and pulled a high-visibility vest from his bag.
I have permission from the manager to record here as long as I don't do anything foolish. I'm here working on a project for university. The Spirit of Steam,
he said. James looked at the young man curiously.
What kind of spirit do you mean? You're not talking about ghosts, are you?
I am,
said the young man.
There have been many ghost sightings in photographs over the years. Such things as ghost orbs or even shadow figures showing up on digital photographs or on CCTV video footage. Where most people go to graveyards or old houses to find ghosts, I felt I'd try my hand at finding the ghosts of engines and rolling stock here. If none show up, I'll work on something else.
James rolled his eyes. The very idea of ghosts was absurd. Sure, he had thought he had at times seen spirits, but those had been turned out to be real things like Percy covered in ice or something else.
Well, you better be careful. A scrapyard is nowhere to play around, even at night.
James's driver explained.
I know. That's why I asked the manager. He said as long as I don't climb on piles of scrap metal, keep my safety vest on, and follow the safety guidelines, I can film here while it's closed.
The young man then picked up his camera and snapped a picture of James and his crew.
One for the memories,
he said, chuckling. Then he wandered off into the mist.
Strange lad,
James said.
I think it's interesting. I hope he's not too disappointed if he finds nothing,
said the driver. Soon James was uncoupled, and he began to puff out of the siding. Suddenly there was a clang, and his wheels left the rails. They bounced along the sleepers for a moment before his driver put on the brakes.
Bust my buffers! What happened?
James asked. His driver got down and inspected.
Some scrap metal must have tumbled off that pile onto the rails. You hit it and off you went.
Oh, brilliant! Now what are we going to do?
The driver and fireman headed to the office to speak with the manager. They returned with bad news.
The breakdown gang won't be here till tomorrow, James. You'll have to wait here for the night, I'm afraid.
Oh, lovely!
James hissed.
I was looking forward to a rest in my nice warm shed.
And with that, James's crew left and went home. The smelter still hummed with activity behind him, the graveyard shift working into the night. Eventually, James felt his eyelids drop down, and the red engine fell asleep. A sudden hiss suddenly roused James from his slumber. He opened his eyes and looked around. The fog had become thicker, so thick that he could hardly see anything. Even the shapes of the buildings and trucks were lost in the gloom. Suddenly another hiss echoed in the yards. Only this time, it was accompanied by the sound of groaning metal.
Hello? Is someone there?
James called out. No one replied. Only the sound of more hissing. And this time, puffing. Only the puffing sounded different each time. It sounded like 3 different engines, but each puff sounded like it was coming from everywhere at once. James felt a wave of nerves roll along his boiler. He felt surrounded all around, and what was worse, he didn't know who was surrounding him. Then he felt the ground shudder. Something big was coming. It had to be another engine, but in the fog, James couldn't be sure. The chopping and rumbling and screeching came closer and closer. Then, out of the corner of his eye, James saw a shape move in the fog past him. In the dim yard lights, it just looked like a dark shadow. The chopping was louder than ever, and the metal screeching sound, the sound of rusty wheels turning, sounded almost alive, like cries and moans. The shape moved past him, and then suddenly vanished. James gulped and closed his eyes tightly.
It was just a dream. Just a dream. Just a dream.
He comforted himself. Soon sleep closed in again, and James drifted off to a dreamless sleep. James was soon derailed and taken to the works to be looked over. After the inspection, the red engine was asked to take a passenger train when he got back to Knapford. The run helped ease James's nerves, and he soon forgot about what he thought he had seen. A few days later, the young man came to see James and his crew at the sheds. He was there to show them the pictures he had taken.
Check this one out first,
he said as he passed them the photo he had taken of James and his crew. In the photo, they saw James and his crew with the smelter shed behind them. But next to James, with just a corner sticking out, was a faded-looking tender. It wasn't very clear, and it was a little transparent, like it had passed by the camera too quickly to be clearly captured.
Now what's that? It looks like an engine's tender.
I was the only one there.
James said, rolling his eyes.
Your camera must be faulty or something.
And that's not all.
The young man continued. He had brought his camera to the crew. The display screen showed one of the sheds in the ironworks, one of the yard lights, and piles of twisted scrap. It was all barely visible through the thick fog, the young man quickly explained.
I was messing with some of the settings and forgot I'd switched it from picture mode to film mode. I tried to take a still picture, but it wouldn't click like it usually would. So I took out my second camera and went to photograph something else. I was only away for a few moments before, well, watch.
He hit play on the camera, and the film played. The picture shuddered as if the camera was sat down. The voice of the man bemoaning his apparent misfortune, followed by the sounds of footsteps scurrying away. Then another sound came, a kind of puffing noise, followed by screeching metal. The screeching sounded intensely pained. James felt a cold shiver run down his back, and his mind thought back to that night as memories resurfaced. Then a big engine puffed across the screen. It was covered in rust, and had holes in its boiler that showed the boiler tubes. It rolled with a soft puffing sound, which at times sounded like 3 different engines at once. As it puffed past, no fire could be seen in the smoke box. The only light seemed to come from the little red tail lamp on its tender. Slowly, the engine rolled away from the camera, into the darkness, its red tail lamp the only thing in sight. Then the light flickered off, like someone had just flipped a switch.
I later came back and turned the camera off, but you saw it, right?
The young man asked.
Yes, we did,
said the driver.
Are you sure you didn't alter this video?
James asked, his voice quivering.
What? Why do you think I would do that?
You university kids are too clever. That engine might be nothing more than a broken old model toy being pushed through a model railway set done with fancy editing.
I'm serious.
The student insisted.
While I might be clever, I'm not this clever. Besides, didn't you see the engine? It didn't look anything like in any train spotter's book.
What do you mean?
James asked.
Does it look like Gordon, only with too many wheels?
Came a voice. The group turned to see Edward, looking over towards them. The old engine had been quietly building up steam while they had been talking.
Yes, it did. I had to play the video back on my TV to see it better, but I did see more than 3 driving wheels on this engine.
The student said. Edward looked down at his buffers and sighed.
Oh dear. Seems they are still around,
he said.
They? Who are they?
James asked, curious what Edward meant.
Well, they, for lack of a better word, are known as the Killdane Experiment. A tragic tale that took place long ago, and one that no one at the smelters dare speak of.
The group looked on as the old engine continued.
The Kildane Experiment began in 1966. Following the second act of the Beeching Acts, many engines were withdrawn from service and scrapped before their time. Young engines sent to old sidings to rust away and be cut up. It happened so quickly, scrapyards on the other railway became filled to capacity. It was because of this that some trains of scrap came to Sodor for processing. This was before our line became a heritage railway. That summer, a young but eccentric engineer from Croven's Gate came to the scrapyard looking for work. Following this young man's employment, strange things began happening. Workers would sometimes come to begin cutting up a scrap engine, only to find that someone had already started, as many parts were missing. Soon it wasn't just parts, as a whole scrap engine vanished once. For a time, no one could explain what was happening. It seemed as if the engine ceased to exist. Even receipts recording their arrival at the scrapyard would vanish. Police would occasionally patrol the scrapyard by night to keep watch for any break-ins, but none were reported. We were soon to find out what became of those parts. It was during one night when I'd just arrived with a delivery of petrol for the generators. We were just shunting them into their siding when suddenly there was a scream from one of the nearby sheds. The front doors flew open, and out came the young engineer, badly burnt. Before anyone could ask him what had happened, something big puffed out of the sheds in a cloud of steam. It was a monstrous-looking scrap engine. It had no face, just a rusty smokebox door. Its boiler and cab were from an A1, mounted crudely atop a 9F's chassis, pulling a rusty old tender behind it. Steam hissed and smoke billowed from its funnel and from its cab, which seemed to glow bright yellow. The hissing was pained, and at times it sounded like 3 engines puffing at once. The monstrous creation slowly puffed its way down the siding before coming to a stop on the points, when its corroded suspension springs finally snapped. When the paramedics and the police arrived, they asked the engineer what he'd been doing. He said he was trying to create a new engine that could revitalize steam on the mainland. He'd gotten a hold of the engine parts from the ironworks, using the place as a part shop where he could scrounge up all the spare parts he could ever want. During his days off, he would sneak into the yard and steal more engine parts to complete his project. He managed to steal the complete scrap engine using a heavy hauler lorry owned by his brother, Frederick Packard, father to Jenny Packard, in fact. To hide his work, as he knew that all this scrap would be very valuable, he stole and altered receipts from the office to make it seem like no scrap engines had ever been delivered or engines arrived with fewer parts. He'd been in the process of test firing his creation when the water glass burst, spraying scalding steam and water all over him. His goals were terrible and foolish, and for his trouble he would endure many painful surgeries that would end up costing him the use of one of his hands and a lifetime of horrible scars. I sat nearby so I could provide my testimony. During this time, the scrap engine made many terrible noises as it cooled down. Sometimes it was a murmur, other times it sounded like screams. The screams of 3 voices calling out for their end to come. The mess of engine parts was soon dragged away and cut up. But it seems that isn't the end.
Edward said, pausing. The men and James stared in shock at the story so far, and while they didn't know what to say, they had a feeling they could tell what would be coming next. Edward then continued.
Workers would say that they heard the sound of hissing and clanking around the yard during the night shift, like the sound of 3 engines puffing at once, but it wasn't just puffing sounds. Voices crying out for the end to return. That their rest had become disrupted. I am dead. Awaken me. Won't let me rest. For I was, and I am dead. The voices would cry. It seems that engineer, and using whole parts of deceased engines, disrupted their rest, and now they roam the smelter's yard seeking for their end to come. But it never will.
James and his crew looked at the student, who just stared at his camera. His face was still a stone, taking on an ashen appearance. He eventually looked up.
Well,
He said eventually.
I guess my video was a success.
James couldn't help but silently agree. Eventually the student left, and he puffed away to pull another train. He did so quicker than usual, almost as if he was eager to take his mind off of something. For weeks to come, the red mixed traffic engine shuddered at the sight of scrap trains. No one asked why, and no one would ever know why. No one but Edward.